I'm Olivia Bailey, and I'll be interviewing Deb Frisbie for the Remembering Benzie project. Um, some, can you introduce yourself first?
Yes, my name is Deb Frisbie.
And I'm going to ask you just a few warm-up questions just to get you, ready to talk about yourself and get you warmed up a little.
Okay.
So what are your hobbies or favorite things to do in Benzie County?
Well, because we have so much beauty around us, I like to hike the trails. I like to kayak the rivers, and I like to see all the activity at the mountain because we live so nearby.
What does a typical day look like for you?
I get up in the morning and I don't really have to help Riley get off to school, but I get up in the morning to see my daughter off to school, and I sit and relax. I always read my Bible and devotions in the morning, and then our routine has been to go for a walk. I go 3 miles, and my husband goes the first 1.5 miles with me, along with our 2 dogs. And after that, I feel like I'm ready to come home and dig into some work on the computer for all the different things that I have my hands on, because that usually, nowadays with COVID, everything we do has been over Zoom meetings and through emails and such.
Now I'm going to ask you a few questions about your childhood.
Okay.
So where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a little town southeast of Grand Rapids called Dutton. And it was just a little tiny town where everybody knew everybody, kind of Andy Mayberry-ish. And it was a lovely place to grow up.
What was it like growing up there?
You didn't lock your house, you didn't lock your cars, you would go down to your friend's house and come back whenever, and your parents weren't worried about you. I had best friends across the street, I had best friends down the street. I lived close to a park where we spent hours on end climbing trees, playing in a creek, ice skating, you name it. The park was where we just went to have a lot of fun. We were out of doors a lot.
So who raised you, and what were their occupations?
So I was raised by my mother and father. My mother was a stay-at-home mother and loved to bake and cook and just took care of our home. And my father was a business owner in a construction firm, and so he was the breadwinner.
What was your family like?
We had a really cool family. I had 2 older brothers, and I had a younger sister. And our ages were quite spaced out, and so my older brothers were going to the service when I was a teenager, and my younger sister was 7 years younger than me, so when I grew up she was still at home. So it was a little bit different because our ages were so spaced out.
So you mentioned you had siblings. What were their occupations?
So my brother Jim was I think he was a supervisor at Steelcase. My brother Jack took over my father's company, Harold R. Sobey Company, and my little sister worked at Steelcase too, along with my husband.
Did you have any pets growing up?
I did have a couple pets, but for some reason, one of them liked to kill our ducks, and so we didn't have her for very long, and she had to be rehomed. But I had a horse as a teenager, and I had a pig that that I didn't know was going to go to the butcher shop because I thought it was my pet. That's what I had.
What did you do for fun growing up?
I think what I did for fun growing up was just being able to hang out with friends. I just think we're all made for connection, and connection starts at a very young age, and so I just had lots of different friends in that little town that were close by, and we could hang out at the IGA store. We just roamed because we were safe.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school at Dutton Christian Elementary, which was in our little town. In fact, I don't remember having buses. I'm sure there was some bus transportation for some kids, but the school was through a huge farmer's field behind our house. So I could walk through the farm field when it wasn't muddy as a shortcut to school. Because if I had to go the long way around, I would say it was about a little over a mile, if not better. So I was always thankful for good days where I could cut through the field and go to school. And I'm sure there's days where my mom brought me to school too, but I don't remember much of that because we just walked and did all those things.
What was school like when you were growing up?
What was school like while I was growing up? For me, it was challenging, and I remember, of course, I'll remember how different things are today than they were back then. I remember taking naps in kindergarten. We were in the Christian school because it was small. We had blended classrooms, so we had first and second grade together. We had second and third grade together. So all I can remember is that there was always an older class in my classroom until I finally got to the 9th grade. And so, most of those kids that were in that school I knew because I went to church with them as well. And that was my elementary education that went kindergarten through 9th. And then in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I went to the larger public school, which is in Caledonia, a town just south of us. And that's where I finished up my last 3 years.
What were your relationships with your teachers like in middle school or high school?
I think they were good. I think I did my best at everything I tried to do. And so, yeah, I got along well with my teachers.
Do you remember having any memorable teachers?
I do. I think one of my most memorable teachers, and I think I even got a spanking from her, but I think she was the one that I knew that cared the most for me, because I think I had a little bit of bullying going on when I was in elementary school, and her name was Mrs. Hieronymus, and there was something about her that you just knew that she cared about you deeper than just your homework, schoolwork, teaching, and that stuff. So for some reason, she's always stood out in my mind.
Did you attend college?
I didn't attend college until 1982, and that was after my second child was born. And I was on a layoff from General Motors, thinking that I would not be going back, and so I decided that now was the time to get my education if I was no longer going to work for General Motors. And so I did that and it seemed like in 1982 that they were just opening up the world to adult education. It may have been there before, but I recognized it then that they were opening up this world to adult education. And so I always thought that I wanted to do something in the field of humanities, social work, and my other part of me thought I wanted to be a paralegal as well. So I just went and started taking the required classes, the English 101 and those types of things. They were 4-hour classes in the evening, so I was able to take care of my new baby during the day, and then my husband was home in the evening to take care of the children, and I was able to go to those quad classes at Aquinas.
So, like, what did you study, and what was your major?
Well, like I said, I had hoped that I would go into something in the field of humanities, and in fact, I took a career class and just to see if I was on the right track for who I was and how I was designed, and it did seem like it was the field of humanities that I was going to go down. But then my college education got cut short because I did get called back to General Motors. And I weighed the pros and cons of, continuing college and having a career in something different than what I was doing. But it was almost like General Motors I had golden handcuffs on, because there was nobody that paid the kind of money to employees that General Motors did. And so I just felt like I had already accumulated some years there. The benefits and everything outweighed what I was thinking about doing in the future, and so I decided to go back to GM.
So when you were in college, how did you decide to study humanities?
How did I decide to study humanities? I was actually just going long enough that I didn't even get into the world of humanities, because I was filling the requirements, and I knew it was going to be a slow process. It wasn't like I was a full-time student. So I just started with required classes, and before I got called back, that's all the farther I got.
Did you always know that you wanted to work in some sort of humanities field?
I feel like I didn't know that until there were things that happened in my life that I started to realize where my passion and my fuel were coming from. And I remember because my world seems to revolve around children, and I remember that just before I got married, all I did was babysit. I had babysitting jobs, different families, and just babysat all the time. And I can remember that weddings aren't like they are now. We didn't have bachelorette parties or anything. And I laugh when I look back at that, because my husband and I babysat the Friday before we got married on Saturday. And it's like, that just seems so strange to me. But I look back now and say, my life has always been about kids. I babysat the night before I got married, and not having any children of my own. So I just think, wow, that was just meant to be. And I think it's just looking back on those things that make me realize that yes, I've been designed and I've been created uniquely to be a beacon for kids and families.
Did you have any memorable professors in college that you can remember?
Did I have any memorable professors? I think my English teacher, knowing how scared I was going back to school and kind of feeling like a dummy, and I had been out of got married in 1972. This is 10 years later. Didn't know that much about adult education. Was I going to go in and sit with some really, smart kids that just, are coming out of school? And all I know is that she wanted every person to succeed. And she was going to make it so that you could succeed no matter what it took. So yeah, and I can't remember her name.
When you left college to go back to General Motors, where were you living?
We were living back in the town that I grew up in, and I was married. So, like I said, I got married in 1972, and worked a couple different places before I got hired at General Motors. And then after getting hired at General Motors, we were still living in Dutton. We had bought a house not far from where I grew up, so that was really a memorable experience too. Looking back, being able to move back where you grew up and keep your roots and to stay there. And so I was living back in Dutton.
What was your job at General Motors?
Production. I was a factory rat. I just worked on the floor. Parts. I worked at 3 different General Motors plants. I started out at a plant in Grand Rapids on Burton and Burlingame, and then they built a new plant for fuel injection when we went from carburetors to fuel injection, and so there was a new plant in Coopersville, and I transferred over to that plant. And then just a few years before I actually ended up taking a buyout, I went to a Lansing plant because I lived, it was a half a dozen of one or 6 of the other, to either stay at the plant in Coopersville or just to stay living where we were living and go to Lansing. So I chose to go to Lansing.
So when did you decide to leave General Motors and work at court-appointed social advocate?
Okay, so so when did I leave General Motors and start my work with court-appointed special advocacy for Kent County? So that was a CASA, and that stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocate, and I did that after I took a buyout from General Motors. I had almost 25 years in. It was a downturn in the economy, and so they were offering buyouts to employees with a certain number of years. I met the criteria that they were asking for, and so I was able to retire in 2005, I believe. And then just before I knew I was retiring, so I commuted an hour both ways on the back and forth to work, so that was 2 hours, and then I worked 8 hours, and I kept thinking to myself, what am I going to do with 10 hours of my day that I'm not working? And so I started looking on a website. It was a 211 website, I believe. And I don't know how I found out about it, but somebody said that they have volunteer positions on there. You can narrow it down from, women or working with men or children, or you can search it and narrow it down to, just exactly what you want. And I can remember going in and I'm looking at all these volunteer positions, and they were like really good descriptions of what you would be doing as a volunteer. So I hit on this CASA one because you worked with women and children, and the description was like, oh my goodness, this is like social work and some paralegal work. I mean, it was just a combination of everything. And so in 2005, I signed up to go through their training program to become a court-appointed special advocate for children in Kent County. Because this is for children. It's for children who have been abused or neglected and have had removal and were part of the court and the state system. So very powerful position as a volunteer. So that was, I thought that was unusual in its own right. So I went through the training and was trained to be a CASA. And it was all history after that.
So what were some of the things and roles that you had at CASA?
So the role as a court-appointed special advocate is to be a voice for a child who doesn't have a voice in the court system. And so my role was to oversee every aspect of that child's life, from the bio parents to the foster parents to the school to the medical needs to anything, daycare, anything that is involved with that child's life, I kept watch over. And then every 3 months, after we call it adjudication, I had to write reports on my findings, my factual findings on what was going on in the child's life and how the child was doing and its placement. I had to advocate for the child, because if the child needed some special medical needs or some special school placement or protection, no matter what it was, I was advocating to the court and to the judge on what was in the best interest of the child. So everything that we did had to be factual, but it also had to be what was in the best interest of the child, because we were an extra set of eyes in the child's life besides the, foster care workers and, everything else in the system. We were an extra special set of eyes that those people didn't have time for. And so I also would spend time with the children. I would spend no less than 2 hours a week with just the children, whether we went to a park or whether we went to, and my choice was to take cases, because we go through all the case files. My supervisor would put a case file in front of me, and when a case would close and I would take a new case, she would say, here's the files. And so you would go through those files and just see what was a good fit for you. There were CASA workers who liked to work with teenagers. There were CASA workers who, that were male and wanted to just have male children to work with. I wanted to work with kids that were like 3 or 4 on up to like 10 or 11. And so those were, so you just kind of broke it down in your own mind what was going to be the best fit for you to work with the kids and the family.
So what was your favorite part about your position at CASA?
I think it was, everything about it was something that I just loved doing, because I knew I was making a difference in the lives of children, even though sometimes it didn't turn out the way you thought it was, because we think that justice is just, and sometimes we don't always walk out of there feeling like justice is just. But I always felt like I played a role in a child's life because I acted in his best interest, not mine, not a foster parent's, not a bio parent. I just took what I knew, gathered all the information, and made recommendations on what I felt was the best for the child. And sometimes, sometimes that isn't returning to a parent because you discovered things that were uncovered that nobody else had the time to uncover, and you could present that. And then, I think my least favorite thing was writing court reports. It's pretty hard to put on paper something so serious, and finding good in everything, because there are some things that bio parents were doing well. And so I think that was the only thing I dreaded, was writing my court reports.
Have your experiences at CASA changed your life in any way?
Absolutely. Yep. They so what changed my life being a CASA? I think I became a more compassionate, empathetic person towards bio parents who had their children removed. I think before I could have been really judgmental and and not caring, and thinking that, well, this happened and so that's the result of it or whatever. But I think I became more caring, empathetic, and compassionate, knowing some of the background of these lives, and so CASA changed me a lot.
So moving on to your family life, when and where did you meet your husband?
I met my husband in high school at Caledonia High School, and I think it was our junior year, and that's where I met him. We were high school sweethearts.
What did your husband do as an occupation?
So when we met, he was a janitor at the high school. And then after we got out of high school, he went into the construction trade. He was an iron worker. He set steel. And then down the road, as our family grew and got older, he was getting older, and Steelcase was a huge employer, but they hired family. It was always connected back to family, and that's the way they hired their employees. And my brother introduced him and said, "Hey, Steelcase is hiring. You're getting older. How long are you gonna, be able to, walk on steel and, work outside and just do all the hard work that you do? You should think about coming to work for Steelcase." And he just didn't think that he should ever work indoors, and something along the line changed his mind, and he went to work for Steelcase, and it was the best thing he ever did. And he had a good career there, and he was happy there, and it provided well for our family.
What is your family life like?
My family life right now, what is it like? My family life right now is so you have to have a little backstory. So we raised 2 children, and our oldest daughter is 45, and our youngest daughter is 39. And our youngest daughter had some bouts with depression and some mental illness, and we ended up adopting her 2 children. And so even though I'm way old enough to be a grandmother, which I am, I also became a mother to our youngest daughter's 2 children. So my life right now is with our only daughter left at home, whom we adopted, and she's 17. So when school was in before COVID, we were involved in loving sports and just doing all the things that she loves doing. And so since COVID in the last year, things look different. But I'm staying busy with working part-time for the Adoptive Family Support Network, and that's a part-time job in a parent-to-parent as a parent consultant. And then I do some respite care for community mental health. So I take care of children whose parents and foster parents need a little break. Sometimes that's over the weekend, sometimes it's just one day, and sometimes it's for a week while somebody's going to go on spring break. So that's, besides, and then during the day, I also am part of the Michigan Kinship Care Coalition, so I'm doing a lot of work with that. I am on the policy and advocacy team, co-leading, excuse me, and so again, that's the kind of work that I'm working with on the computer, and setting up dates for legislation, to meet with legislators, and just working with that whole coalition on introducing some bills.
So when did you decide to move up north?
We decided it was 9 years ago, but maybe 10 years ago, where we just kind of had a nudging, because we had always vacationed up here with our family. And then we bought a little place not too far from Crystal Lake as a second place to come while the kids were in school downstate. And it wasn't long after that, we just felt a nudging, like, well, why don't we just move up north? And it seemed kind of foreign to us, but we were both thinking the same thing, but it seemed a little foreign to us because we were where we were born and raised, and it was a down market, so it wasn't a good year to sell a home, and it just was strange, but we both were sensing a pull to move up where we've always vacationed and loved the area.
Was it hard to leave and come up north?
At first it wasn't, and then so you asked me, was it hard to leave? At first it wasn't, because there were so many things that fell into place that said this was the right move. Like, our house sold in a down market, and we had a connection up here that said, hey, we'll help you get moved. We found, when our house sold, we had found a house almost immediately, and that was kind of unusual. And so we just felt too many things were falling into place to say, no, this isn't what we're supposed to do. But then after we got up here, it was hard, because then I realized, wow, it's hard to make new friends. It's hard to break into a place where everyone's already settled, and so many people here have lived here all of their lives, and so then I started missing being downstate.
Did you continue to work when you moved here?
No, I wasn't working when I came up here, because I said to my husband I was going to be a CASA in the Traverse City area, because there's a CASA program there. So I was going to go back to CASA work. I call it CASA work, but it's CASA volunteer, because you don't get paid for it. And so I decided, my husband so then Riley went to Betsy Valley Elementary School. She was in 3rd grade. And my husband said, I don't think you should go back to CASA work. I think that we should be volunteering in Riley's school. And so I said, okay. So we decided to volunteer in Riley's classroom 1 day a week, and they welcomed us with open arms and said, yes, Mr. Lupke was her teacher, and he said, yes, we'd love to have you in our classroom. And so that's what we started doing. And so we volunteered there 1 day a week.
What kind of things did you do when you volunteered there?
My husband would help some of the boys. Sometimes it was helping them catch up on their homework. Sometimes it was just helping them, everything that you do in the normal classroom. It might be a reading corner, or it might be just heading up one of their group activities or whatever. But it was kind of nice because we were both there, and the kids got to know us really well, and we just got to be a part of their day, their normal day, and help them along.
You mentioned you volunteer at other organizations around here. So how did you get into volunteering in the first place?
I think CASA, I always volunteered at anything that we had going on downstate as far as school. I always felt like I worked, and so all these women that were part of the PTO, I felt like, man, those girls have to do everything, because there were so many of us women working during that era. And so I always felt like I needed to volunteer in the time that I could, because I was a working mom, and I wasn't there during the school day to be available. And so I think I've always felt like volunteerism has always been a part of me, whether it was church or school or community, meeting community needs. I think that's just always been a part of who I am. But I think I recognized it when I was a working mom, knowing that, there were people who were planning lots of things for my kids that were really, really good things. And how could I be a part of that in my time frame? And so I did the best I could.
So you mentioned some of the organizations that you were a part of. So first, I'll talk about the Betsy Valley Community Center.
Mm-hmm.
What have you accomplished for the Betsy Valley Community Center?
So what have we accomplished for the Betsy Valley Community Center? So our biggest accomplishment in all the years that just a group of people got together, decided that we wanted to focus on children in the Thompsonville area, and of course it's gotten much bigger than that. But we have purchased a dental van, a mobile dental van, that can be used for not only dental services but telehealth, and it can be used for doctors, medical needs, besides the dental needs. So it's equipped to do anything and all of those things, and travel to where the people need it, instead of the people having to come to a particular place. We can go to them. So, like we have dental hygienists. This van, we didn't have a van before. We had a hygienist that came into the schools in Manistee and Benzie County, and put a cot on the floor and sat cross-legged and cleaned and checked children's teeth. And now they get to sit in a real dental chair with, all the latest technology to get their teeth work done. So that's our biggest accomplishment. But we've got many more in the works.
So why did they decide to buy the bus?
So this group of people started meeting probably between 6 and 7 years ago, and it came out of an early childhood group of people in champions. I call them champions, who were from the 5 to 1 neighborhood agency, whatever, and this champion got us a group of people together and said, what would you, if you could dream up anything, what would you like to see for this area? Well, I'm talking about an area that I live in, and so what would I like to see for those things? And we just started dreaming up a list. You know, we started realizing that there wasn't licensed childcare. We started realizing we didn't have a laundromat. We were realizing that transportation was an issue, and just all the things that we were dreaming about. We were dreaming about making it more accessible and a better place for everyone. And so those were our dreams, and a group of people just kept meeting and kept meeting and kept meeting, and our table started growing at who was coming. You know, like we had Dr. Robertson out of Kids Creek in Traverse City said, I used to work in Appalachia. I'm concerned about immunizations for all children, and how do we make that more accessible to them? Because he realized that, you know, we're always asking people to come to Traverse City or come to Beulah or whatever, and so this table of people and agencies just kept growing. So we wanted to build a building. We had the renderings of a building with a gym. We all had work groups. We were going to look at other daycare centers. Was our biggest thing. We wanted to put in a daycare center. We wanted to put in a medical center in there. We wanted to put in just in activities, like put a gym on with rooms that would, we could do aerobics in, we could do all sorts of things in. Then we'd have a regular gym that would have all the sports in it. And then, you know, we dreamed up this building, and we worked with an architect, and we had the renderings of what that building would look like. And then we kept talking about, okay, how do we sustain a building like this? How do we sustain a building like this? And, you know, who's going to pay the rent, and who's going to pay for the maintenance and all that kind of stuff? Because this was going to be a community building that was going to be, you know, funded and put up by stakeholders. And we knew that the biggest cost and the biggest thing that we wanted was that child care center. And after so much research and realizing what kind of daycare center it would be, we realized that it would cost $350,000 a year to keep a daycare center up and running. And that also meant that if children left, you had to have children in place to replace the child that left the center, so that it was continuously at capacity. And we were looking at the daycare center over by the Little River Band. We were working with Jason Cross over there, and we were looking at that. And when we realized that right now it wasn't feasible to put a building up, we started changing our focus, and we had this dental hygienist that was one of the people who started coming to our meetings, and they were also an agency that was a clinic. And she said, you know, I've seen these vans before, and I've talked to so and so and so. And when she started, you know, talking to us about what this mobile dental van could look like, then we started bringing more people to the table. Like we talked to Watson's, okay, what would a van like this cost us? And then we have to talk to somebody who's going to build all this stuff into it, and hey, what will that cost? So that's, I think the sustainability of a building that we really wanted for our community, and it was going to be on the Betsy Valley Elementary School grounds. when we realized that it's a beautiful dream, but the sustainability wasn't there yet. And so we turned our focus to the dental van. I mean, that was scaling it down from, $1 million or whatever it was going to cost to build a building to, I don't know, under, 100,000 or maybe more than that to get a mobile dental van, and still being, being an asset to the community. So that's what we put our focus on, and kept going to the meetings, and just working together with all these community agencies and people who had interest in doing that, and working, what does that look like contractually to work with them? I mean, there's so much that goes into it. And that's why I say I'm not even a good spokesman for the Betsy Valley Community Center, because Marty Manti has been our consultant, and she gets funded through grants to continue to lead us in the direction we should go in. Now we're talking about rural development and what that's going to look like in the Thompsonville. And that area is unique because we're Benzie County and we're Manistee County. And so it's a unique area with quite a few townships involved, but it's still that tight-knit community that we want to serve. And, that would be Caliva, Bear Lake, Benzie, and Manistee. So all those together, how do we serve this? The dental van can go anywhere outside the county. It's not stuck to just being in our county. So I forgot where we were going with that.
That's okay. That was really interesting. Okay. So what more is needed for students and citizens in these areas?
I think accessibility to services. I think that we know that transportation in that area is difficult. I mean, I think we all take for granted that everybody drives 2 cars and this and this, but there's areas that have a different socioeconomical status. We know that there's a lot of Alice families in that area, and Alice is that the working people who are working, and yet they're poor. They're the working poor, because it's just one catastrophe that could happen that could knock them off their feet. And so that might be a furnace that quits working. That might be a transmission that goes out on a car. That might be whatever. But these families are working, and yet it's hard for them to get their feet on the ground. And so those are the people that we want to make their lives better in some way. So, I mean, so what's needed for those areas are just a combination of people who all work together for the same common good.
Have you been involved with any other projects with the Betsy Valley Community Center?
We're working on this rural development right now, so there are some projects that are going to come out of that. I'm also working with the there's some faith-based stuff that's going to be going on, and I'm hoping that we can work together with the faith-based to make. I think we have to stop looking at all the problems and saying, because I can pinpoint this, and all these different things, but I think we have to change our focus, and we have to start talking about how can we beautify somebody's life, how can we add to somebody's life? How can we add to the community? How can we beautify the community instead of always focusing on all these individual problems? Because I think once we change that focus, I think it changes our perspective of what we really think is needed. Because I think that the poor will always be among us, but I think that we have to learn a way to help without hurting. And I don't think we always know. We think we're doing good, and yet we don't understand what we might be doing to somebody's dignity. And so I think that we have to be very careful of our perspective, and what we think is the right thing to do might not be the right thing, because we might not have the right people at the table who are telling us from their perspective what's really needed. So I think Betsy Valley's work right now is to bring in more people from the community, along with those agencies and along with those other things, because we can't decide what somebody else that isn't like us needs. They're the ones that know what they need. They're the ones that can help us on what our next steps would be to help the people in the community.
So you mentioned you're part of some other organizations. You said you worked part-time at the Adoptive Family Support Network?
Yeah, so I work part-time for the Adoptive Family Support Network, which is a part of DA Blodgett St. John's. And we are a nonprofit that is a post-adoptive support resource. And even though it is a post-adoptive resource, we also focus our attention on foster families, kinship families, guardianship families, and adoptive families. So we do that through a number of ways. We do that through events, we do that through training, we do that through face-to-face meeting for if there's resources that are needed for those families. And we're partially funded through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services for this parent-to-parent program. So the parent-to-parent program is statewide, and we train other parents on how to be a resource for these families in their own communities. And so I'm a parent consultant for them, and that's what I do on a part-time basis.
Why do you think it's important that adoptive families have support?
I think that it's very important for adoptive families to have support, or any family that is taking a child other than their own into their home, because those children are coming with hurts and pain from loss, whatever that loss is, and oftentimes we think that we're doing the child a favor by taking them into our home, and we don't realize the job that's set before us, because that doesn't, just because we take these children into our home doesn't change everything for that child. That child has an adjustment to make. So there are a lot of children who have been through trauma who are coming into the homes, and it's because they are challenging, we have to teach parents a paradigm shift on how to care for these children, because we have to heal their hurts before we can get the children to be healthy and whole and overcome the obstacles that adoption brought with them. So it takes a lot of work, because raising a neurotypical child that hasn't had any adversity is different than raising a child who's had adversity, and we have to work with those children in a therapeutic way. And a lot of parents don't know how to therapeutically work with their children because they haven't had to. And so that kind of support is needed for kids who have been really challenging, because their behavior is their voice. Their behavior is not to tick you off. Their behavior is the only voice that they have. And so sometimes that's the way it comes out, and it makes it a challenge.
So what kind of resources are available for these families?
So what the Adoptive Family Support Network, of course, has is we have 96 trained leaders. We've only been in existence 5 years, but we've trained 96 parent leaders across the state. And so that's one of their resources. So if we find out that there's a parent in Escanaba that's really struggling right now, we have a trained parent leader there, or one of us on staff. We'll make sure that we touch base with that parent to see what exactly it is that they need. And sometimes in these cases, it is just a listening ear. It is just somebody to say, that let this mother have a safe place to say, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I don't know what to do anymore, it's hard, and just letting and just listening. And there's something about the Adoptive Family Support Network that's so special, is because every one of us on staff is an adoptive parent. And each one of us have adopted in a different way. So I adopted grandchildren. I have one of the other gals on staff adopted from DHHS, biracial children. Another one has adopted internationally. Our director didn't adopt, but she gave a child up for adoption. So here's a whole group of people that cover the whole triad of what it's, in a child's life. So you're a bio parent, you're a foster parent, you're an adoptive parent, but we have that. And if we get a call that somebody's in a hard spot or they need a resource or whatever, we figure out what it is that they need. And then whether they might need a resource for who's a good therapist in Traverse City for grief, because one of the bio parents may have passed away. And so just a whole gamut of, the questions that get asked. What's really cool about AFSN is we have a private online support group. There's over 3,000 parents in this thing now, and it's just a grassroots, we're just a grassroots agency that started something because of the passionate hearts. And so this online support group, because of social media, and that's the way people converse and do things nowadays, they can ask a question on there, and I don't have to answer it, because if somebody's in Roscommon County and that's where somebody in Roscommon County is asking a question about, there might be 10 answers on there in 10 minutes. So that group right there, and it takes a village, and there's just so many cool stories that come out of the fact that when you're all adoptive parents, or you're foster parents, or a kinship parent, you're in a group of people that say, I get it, and I get you. And so this is a safe place. And there's a lot of cool stuff that happens because of that.
So you mentioned that you hold events and things.
Yep.
What were some of those events?
So some of my coolest, most fun event that I like to hold before COVID is Above the Wake. So there's a guy in the east side of the state, and he's got a nonprofit that works with autism kids with autism, and he teaches them how to wakeboard. And he goes down to Florida and does this, and he does it on his lake in the east side of the state. But Tom and I connected, and he said, I'd love to do this for your kids. And I said, oh, okay, come on. So we go once a year to Lake Cadillac in August, and we call it Above the Wake. And he teaches kids how to paddleboard, and he's taught kids how to wakeboard. And it just being in the water, the parents are all there. We have a picnic. It's just a day that is just a load of fun. So that's my favorite one. We also, for AFSN, we also hold we've held an event at Great Wolf Lodge. We take over the lodge. It pretty much is all adoptive families. This last one, we had a group picture with over 400 people in it, and that wasn't even all the people that were there. So that's huge. We plan activities during that whole weekend that they're there. Like we might have something for mom, like, in some of the training rooms or whatever. And then just group activities, kids activities. It's really fun because our kids get together with other kids who are in families just like theirs. And so there's so much joy in seeing parents connect to other parents and say, oh, I know you from the Facebook group. I recognize your name. Or these kids that are playing, like we have two people that head up our teen and preteen games, and they were camp counselors. They're a husband and wife. So they come up with the coolest thing to do. But those kids are all in this huge banquet room, all just being kids. And they're out, they're with other kids that have been in this family that's been formed just like theirs. And they have this freedom to pretty much come and go. Mom and dad just can drop them off at this room, and they can just have fun without, parents' oversight, and just be themselves. Just be who they are. And for me, just to be able to see all that is just that just fills I'm just filled with joy when I can see what's happening when you step back and just look at that. It's remarkable. It's just remarkable.
How have your experiences in adoption affected how you relate to other adopted families?
How do I relate to other adopted families? I think I stated that before. We get it. We understand. We understand the joyous moments, and we understand the painful moments. We understand the challenging moments, because anybody that has a lived experience, and I always feel like God gives you these experiences, and I use that experience to help somebody else who's going through maybe the same thing I went through. Whether you call that carrying their burden, or helping carry the weight of what's on them. But there's a freedom in, again, like I said, just someone knowing that you understand because you've been there, and that's good for both people. That's good for the person who says, I was there, but now I'm here. Okay, so that you can give that hope that things will get better. Because sometimes when you're in the throes of it, it doesn't ever feel like it's ever going to get any better. And so we try to encourage and say, yes, there is going to be light at the end of the tunnel. Things will get better. And because we've had that same experience. So I think that's how it's changed me. Until you adopt, you see that happening, but you haven't experienced it, and so you don't understand all the ins and outs and all all the things, because I think people think they're rescuing kids, and sometimes that's where helping hurts, because it's way, way, way more than that. We aren't rescuing kids. We have to help kids heal. So from a wound that happens emotionally, and it's not just physical, it's emotional. So, and we don't know how each kid is gonna, take that loss. But there's a connection there, so it leaves a wound.
So at Kensington Church, which is the church you go to, you are a move-out leader. So what exactly do you do as a move-out leader?
So this initiative has been going on for a few years, but we want to be the church outside the walls. We don't want to just go to church and that's it, and people come to church. So the Move Out Initiative is just all different people who have been created uniquely, and my experiences have been part of my story. Everybody has a story, and they've been part of my story, and I think that that's where part of my passion lies. And again, I go back, I live in Thompsonville, so my heart and my passion is in Thompsonville, and the kids and the families there, and whatever. And so it's whatever you want to make it, the Move Out Initiative. So we were asked, we found out they had a barbecue grill, this really, really cool barbecue grill. And the other Kensington churches have them over on the east side of the state, and they go into the community. They go into the community every Saturday to do community meals, and so we found out that Kensington is making another one of these barbecue grills, and they're going to give it to the people to the church in TC. So when I heard that they were going to have that, I just thought, oh my gosh, my husband loves to grill. We love to feed people and have hospitality and all this stuff. And they asked us, would you lead that group? Would you lead a group of people who would like to bring meals to the community? And we said, and my husband and I wanted to serve together on what we do. And so we said, well, that sounds like a perfect fit. He's the griller, and I love to invite people, and I'm connected to the community and a lot of other agencies where we can have, we can all work together as a network of people. And so it's not off the ground yet, but we're hoping to start some community meals once a month in Thompsonville at the park. And that's just... we're going to call it Elevate Community. And that T for me is Thompsonville, even though we have to leave it generic. But in my mind, it's like, okay, the T, community, is Thompsonville. So we're just starting to work on it. But we had a group of people. I did a panel at church to introduce what we wanted to do. And people signed up to be on my team and be on our team, mine and Dick's. And so that's what we're going to do. And we're just waiting for the COVID restrictions to be over to see what this looks like. So, we're going to, I hope to just have people just come. And there's no strings attached. Just come, be fed, be a community, hang out with your neighbors. Maybe we can have things that go on in the park for the children is what my biggest hope is. And maybe we can bring services eventually as this thing grows. Maybe services can come there, and people can get what they need on the day that there's a community meal. It's going to be in the summer, of course, because we're barbecuing outside. So that's the way we're starting it.
So what drew you to Kensington Church and becoming involved in the church?
So we went to Kensington Church, and the reason why we're at Kensington Church is because the pastor there we had a connection to in our church downstate that we came from. And he's new up here, and I knew that he wanted his church to look much like the churches we were involved in downstate. And that's why this move out thing was so exciting for me, because we did serve a lot outside of our community. And that's how people knew that the faith community looks just like you. We're not any different. We're not any better. We just we're all people, all the same, and we all have a story. And I always feel like, again, we're asking people to come to church, but why aren't we going to where they are at if they can't get there? And so we can be the church no matter where we are. It's who we are. And if we're acting like we are the church, and that's compassionate, and love wins out everything. And that's who we need to be in our community and everywhere we go. So I just feel like when people can't get to the church, then okay, let's somehow we can bring the church to them. And that doesn't have to look like a sermon. That just has to look like loving people, because that's what Jesus did. He went all over just loving people. So that's what we want to be.
So I understand you helped raise money for ski passes for children and teenagers for Crystal Mountain.
Yeah. So the Betsy Valley kids, I looked at some of I looked at the mountain and the disparity in between, some kids that went to Betsy Valley, or any school for that matter, but Betsy Valley's where I live, and so that's the schools where my heart is. And I thought, boy, these kids, the school program costs money, and there's some kids there that probably would love to ski, but just don't have the access to be able to do that. And so I started out a couple years ago just putting out on Facebook, hey, does anybody want to sponsor a kid for the ski program? And I had a bunch of friends that said absolutely. It all came around. It didn't matter when it would come. My friends would have done that. But the ski program comes out in November, and I think we're all thinking about Christmas and how blessed we are and everything. So I had a bunch of people that said, sure, I'll sponsor a child. And then I did that for a couple of years. And then I thought, what can I do and with COVID and not have to ask my friends for money to sponsor these kids, even though they'd all be willing to do it again. But I decided to start making wreaths because it was COVID and I wasn't doing anything. My agency had shut down for a period of time because of some funding that we didn't get from the state. And so at that time I had a lot of time on my hands, so I started making wreaths. So this year I was able to make and sell wreaths, and sponsored 7 kids for the ski school program. So yeah, that's just something. I want the kids that want to ski to be able to ski. I wish I could raise 10,000 and all of them could go, but it is the kids that went were happy, and one of the little girls is just a huge success story, because she's near and dear to my heart, because she is a great granddaughter that's being raised by a great grandmother, and this little girl went we sponsored her the first year, and she loved it. She loved it. And then we were able to sponsor her to go into Master the Mountain, which is the club on Sunday, and they learn a ton of stuff. And I saw her out there this year, and she just goes nonstop. She wants to learn to snowboard. So she's one of the success stories, because I think if we get these kids out on the mountain, they have a love for the mountain. They may work for the mountain when they get 15, 16 years old. And so I just want the kids that want to experience that to be able to do that. And someday down the road, I hope that there's more ways that we can find more sponsors and just all the kids in Benzie County be able to at least try skiing if they've never done it before, if they want to.
Do you know how many ski passes you were able to give out?
Well, this year I did 7. The cost keeps going up a little bit every year, so but this year it was 7, and then it was 7 kids for the school program, and then there were 1 for the Master of the Mountain program. So 8.
So are there any other organizations that you're involved in that you'd like to talk about?
I think the one thing that I forgot to tell you about the Betsy Valley Community Center piece is that I am the recreation leader for the Betsy Valley Community Center. So the recreation team is my goal for the recreation team is to bring the community together. And so we did that once we developed, because we just keep developing what the Betsy Valley Community Center team looks like. You know, we have a board, we're a 501c3 now, we weren't before. And so we've just been building on that. And so we now have like communications people, a speakers bureau, and we wanted this recreation team. So I was asked if I would lead the recreation team. So like I said, we want to build community with that recreation team. And we did 2 events before COVID hit. The third one was going to be a staycation. The third one was, so I'll tell you what the first one was. We did a game night. We just set up about 20 card tables with all different games in the gym at Betsy Valley Elementary School. And it was a huge success. We had over 100 people that came. We had pizza, partially, I think that was all donated from Gino. And it just turned out fantastic. So, I mean, there were parents playing games with kids. There were kids playing games with kids. And it was just, everybody was happy, full of joy. I was able to talk a little bit there about what the Betsy Valley Community Center is doing. And I think that's the way that we can get the word out, is that we hold community events, and then the people that are there, some of them don't even know about the dental van now yet, or they might not know about what our goals are or what we hope to do in the future. So that's a great way to communicate all of that. So then our second one was we partnered with Nordic Rocks, which is part of the Crystal Community Ski Team, or a ski club. And we partnered with them, and they loaned us snowshoes, and they loaned us the Nordic skis that they're actually, that club, that nonprofit is putting skis in all the area schools, Bear Lake and Frankfort, and everybody is part of their winter program for gym and just times when teachers want to take the kids out on the Nordic skis for exercise and outdoor activities. So, we had a snowshoe Nordic ski night. We had a bonfire. We had a great big mountain to slide on. We had tacos for dinner. Again, great turnout, just fun times. You know, Betsy Valley's got a beautiful trail. The school has a beautiful trail. We lit up the whole trail with lights so people could snowshoe down the dark trail. So that was great. So that was our second event. Then our third event was supposed to be a week-long staycation over spring break. And that would be 1 year ago next week. And we were going to bring up a ninja warrior course. And it was going to be run by volunteers. It would be brought up, set up in the gym. and we were going to have activities in some of the other rooms, like we were going to involve Oliver Arts Center for kids doing some artwork, and there were just going to be different activities going on, and that was going to be from 1 to 5 every day of the vacation. We were working with Benzie Bus to provide transportation for anybody that didn't have transportation to get there. And then we made the decision, like the week before spring break, that we would not be able to follow through with that because of locking down Michigan. So the recreation team is just waiting for things to break, and so that we can get started back into creating some community events to bring the people of Thompsonville, Coatmish, Calava, and all those people together for some just fun and relaxation.
So how does your work at CASA relate to your volunteer work up here?
I think everything still stems back and all goes together for my love for children, and because children are part of families. So I always say, if you're loving the child, you're loving the family, because everybody wants you to love their children. I love it when somebody's loving on my kids. So I want people to know that if we're loving their children, we love you too, because you're trusting your children to bring them to things that we're doing, or you're bringing your children because you love your children and you want them to have fun. So all of it stems back that I want to be a voice, and I think I want to use my voice as an advocate to better the lives of the children and the families. Especially in the foster adoptive world, and now with so many grandparents raising grandchildren, and we call them kinship, because we're kin. Sometimes it's aunties and uncles, and sometimes it's cousin, but we know that we struggle to get foster homes, and so I think the state is recognizing that it's better for the children to be with their family and family that they know, whether that's aunts, uncles, grandpas and grandmas, or whatever. And so there are some differences, and so I'm using my voice to be an advocate at the state level. And how can we help grandparents who are in retirement age or near retirement age raise another generation? And so advocacy has been in my blood, because I advocated for those children way back when I became a CASA. So children and advocacy.
What do you like most about volunteering?
What do I like most about volunteering? I think that I have a purpose, and I think that, again, I didn't have these experiences in my life just to keep them to myself or learn from them or whatever. I think that I have to use my experiences and my story to help enter into somebody else's story to make their life more hopeful. Sometimes I can make their life a little bit better, but I think when I'm giving and I see results for other families or other children, I think that I'm the one that's receiving more of a blessing than I might be that family's feeling blessed, because the blessing just comes back to me like, whew, I was able, and I mean that in I don't mean, I want to be humble, because I really feel blessed when I help somebody else, that God used me to be able to make a change or to make something better. So I get richly blessed from helping other people.
What is the most difficult thing about volunteering?
I don't know if there is anything difficult for me. I think I have a partner that it could be difficult if I had a partner that doesn't kind of pick up the slack, because when you're volunteering and you're doing what you love doing, things are still happening at home and things are still having to be done in other areas or whatever. And I have my husband's my partner, and I draw him into a lot of things, and he graciously helps. And I think if it wasn't for him, I don't know if I could do all the things that I do, because there's times where he's holding down the fort. So I owe him a lot.
Was there anything or anybody that inspired you to be an active part of your community?
I think there's been all kinds of people that have inspired me along the way. I think there's been people who have encouraged me. There's been people who have pushed me out of my comfort zone and say, go do this, go do that. And so just a lot of people that I can think of, that, pastors and supervisors, and looking at Marty Manting and what a champion she is for communities and for kids, and I think I've been around like-minded people, because that's the stuff that I've worked around. So it's usually people who have the same passion as me in children, and they've all pushed me. Like I said, the court reports. I was so scared to write my first court report. I was shaking in my boots, because this went to the judge. Important decisions got made because this was the most important piece of paper that the judge has. It was on the top of his desk. This is what he made and based a lot of life decisions on. And I can't tell you how scary that was. And yet I had a supervisor that said, you can do this, or, pushed me or showed me how to do something. And so all along the way, I've never felt like I knew what I was doing, because I always had to have somebody. I always had to have a teacher before me. To teach me how to do those things. I think about my daughter Riley too, and how I've taken her to Lansing with me, because she's also a part of my story, and she's also down the road going to be able to make a difference in somebody's life because of her experience and because of her story, being raised by a grandparent and having a parent that wasn't active in her life. And so she may go on to be an advocate someday, somehow, some way, for kinship families too. I'm hoping that I can bring her in as testimony before a committee on some of the struggles that she's had to go through with having going through adoption and having an absent parent and whatever. So I'm teaching her. Whether she picks up the baton or not, that's okay with me. She'll find her passion, she'll find her way, she'll find whatever it is that she wants to do. But I've always had to have someone who inspired me and taught me and pushed me from the nest. I've just had to be pushed from the nest. So yeah, and I appreciate all those people, because I can't do what I'm doing without having them go before me or doing what they did.
So how has the COVID pandemic affected your volunteer work?
When you talk about how has it affected the COVID affected my work, it has affected my work to the point where, like I said, I wasn't busy. I just didn't have the purpose and the plans that I had to do if we weren't in COVID. So the isolation almost made me feel really lonely, like, because I was a part of doing this, and I was a part, I was planning the recreation thing, and I was meeting with committees to get things done, and I was doing all this, and then at the same time as COVID, like I said, we lost some funding for AFSN, so there was a period of about 8 months that I wasn't working, and so that was life-changing for me. And I think that's why I buried all my time in, like, well, I'll make wreaths and I'll sell these wreaths. And, so I tried to stay busy that way, because everybody's plans were put on hold. There was just, everything stopped. And so, yeah, there was a period of time where I was kind of feeling down, like nothing to do, because I'm used to staying busy. And yet I say stay busy, but yet having, boundaries around my time, and making sure that, my family came first and whatever. So, but yeah, that's hard. We're still living it. I want to make plans. I want to get the ninja course up here. I want to do all that. I want to barbecue in the park, and we can't set a time or a day to even do that yet. So, but when we do, there'll be some huge celebrations.
What has been your most memorable experience or story or memory from your volunteer work?
I think one of my best memories, and it just continues to live on, is that one of my really tough CASA cases, the mother's rights were terminated, and along with the father's, and I carried this case all the way through to who the adoptive parent was going to be, and to this day, I am in contact with the bio mother. She will text me and ask me how I'm doing, even though she doesn't have her children. And I'm friends with the adoptive mother, and I get to see those 4 kids all the time. And I get to see what she's teaching them, and I get to see that. But there's this beauty of knowing that I could still be friends with a bio mother when I couldn't recommend that her children go back to her, and knowing that we still have a bond. I mean, she just texted me and said, "Hey, when are you coming to Grand Rapids? Wants to have lunch or coffee," and so that's a memory that just keeps going on. And I don't know how that happened, because at times she looked at me as an enemy, and then, today we're friends. So to me, that's really special and something I can always take with me.
How do you see yourself participating in your community going forward?
Pulling together the community barbecues. I think if I could say my biggest goal, I have 2 goals. My biggest goal is to partner the faith community with other agencies, other nonprofits, and the other goal is to work with legislation to reintroduce 2 bills that unfortunately got vetoed last year for kinship families. So those are my 2 goals moving forward, and both of them are doable.
So you just mentioned talking with like legislation about these bills. So can you tell me more about that and your role?
So I'm the co-leader of the advocacy and policy group inside of the Michigan Kinship Care Coalition. It's a grassroots group of people who got together and said we need policy changes and reform and whatever for kinship families. And so I try to set up appointments. I started out with just a coffee talk with one of our legislators many years ago, and said, hey, I need to talk to you about kinship care, because kinship care looks different than foster care. Families are put into guardianships, and there's a gap in service. The kids that are in foster care get much more than kids who are going into a guardianship and, with a kinship family. So just recognizing all those gaps in services, working for AFSN and hearing from these families day in and day out, wondering where they're going to get financial help, because, they're falling on hard times, and they're raising their grandchildren, and they're retired, and they're on fixed incomes, or whatever, or, so started talking to legislators, realized that legislators were really starting to listen, like, oh, wow, we didn't know that. And so we had 2 bills last year that had passed both houses unanimously. They had appropriations, and the 2 bills were one for an advisory council for kinship families, and one was a navigator program. And the navigator program would take someone who is entering into a kinship situation. They say, I will take my kid, I will take my grandchildren, or my nieces or nephews or cousins, and and it will help them through that whole process, from the time they entered care till the time whether they just remain in a guardianship, or they go into foster care, or they get adopted. But it would be something that would navigate them through the processes. And the advisory council was a council that is going to decide for the children in the state of Michigan what's going to be best for that navigator program. So they were tie-barred. So when one was vetoed, both of them got vetoed. And so we were completely shocked that they were. We thought that there was no chance of them getting vetoed. And then they were vetoed for technical, whatever the word is, technical. And from what we know, there were going to be 9 members on the advisory council, which I was hoping to be one of. And it was going to take people from different sectors. It was going to take, a number of, grandparents and lived experiences. And the governor evidently wanted to pick wanted to pick the people who would be on the advisory council. And so for that reason, it was vetoed. It could have gone back before the end of the year. We knew we had time constraints. We knew that we were either going to help override the veto, or that we were hoping that the Senate Majority Leader and the governor would work together to fix whatever was in that bill that she didn't like, or what she wanted changed. But that did not end up happening. And so the bills were completely vetoed, done, and now they have to be rewritten, get new numbers, be reintroduced, and that could be a 2-year process. But, so now I'm talking with legislators about these bills that are going to be coming before them. We want their support, and, oftentimes I can bring another grandmother with me and say, this is her experience, and this is why we need to see change there, and different reasons. So, and we have 30 new legislators this last voting session. So we have a lot of experienced legislators that went out, and both of them went out on time constraint, or whatever they can only serve 6 years, so, or 4. And so we lost our 2 champions for those bills. So that's why we got to keep talking and find out who our next champions are going to be to sponsor those bills. We need sponsors, but they're going to come back out, and we're gonna fight through it again. So.
How do you think you can help others become more involved in the community?
I think we have to invite people to the table. Whether it's, the invitation for the Kensington's, barbecue that doesn't just have to be in Thompsonville. That barbecue is going to have wheels. Anybody can take that thing into any community they want to take it to. So just, inviting people at all the opportunities that there are out there. I think we can create new things to do for our communities, and I think we just need to invite people, like the Betsy Valley Community Center. We can invite more people to the table. We just have to be able to get the word out, like what we're doing, because everybody wants to work towards a cause, and it just has to be the cause that's near and dear to your heart. And once that people know that, like when I needed volunteers for the recreation team, well, who doesn't want to have fun? I had volunteers. I had, you and all kinds of volunteers from Riley's school that said, yeah, we'll help out that night. And so I just inviting more people to join in what you're doing, because we live in a busy world and a lot of people don't know what's going on. So.
What kind of personal goals do you have for yourself moving forward?
Just like I said, getting those 2 bills reintroduced and getting champions for them and getting them across the finish line. Those are 2. And then for Thompsonville, just creating a closer, caring community. Yeah.
And what are your hopes for specifically the future of Benzie County?
My hopes for Benzie County are that we become a more compassionate, caring place to be. That we lay down our judgments, and that we just try to be more understanding, caring, and compassionate. I think we have good neighborhoods. We have supportive. I look at the ice rink out there and I'm thinking, wow. I remember when the ice rink was down on Crystal Lake, and to see it move up here, and then seeing the gentleman that retired, that did it tirelessly year after year after year, and to see things like that. And now I want to see a community that pulls together like that in all different areas, so that all areas around us have things like that, and that we can be more caring and compassionate.
So I just have a few more questions, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking your time for this interview.
You're welcome.
It's so interesting. I love hearing everything.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, so is there anything we didn't talk about that you thought we would?
No, this is kind of how I thought it would go. Yeah.
Do you have any questions for me or about the Remembering Benzie project?
Yeah, so where, I know I read what this whole project was about, but remind me what it's going to do.
So, basically with the Legacy Project, we're trying to get just the stories and voices of citizens in the community and help share those, because everybody has different story, and we all think that they deserve to be told. So we're going to take these interviews and we'll put them online. I can't remember exactly where, but they'll be online.
Okay.
And we'll put them on YouTube so that everybody has access to them to see just how amazing all these people are.
I don't feel that amazing, but just following my heart.
Yeah.
So, well, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, I think that's all I have.
That's it?
Yeah.
Whew.